Hey, everybody. Hey, Jasmine.
Hey,
Good to have you here.
glad to be here.
Let me welcome everybody and sort of describe what we're doing, and then I'll give a little intro to you, and you can intro yourself how you like. Okay.
Sure.
So, hi, everybody. Welcome. First of all, if you joined us for the live experience, the online conversation, then you know that the first, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes, we were technologically off the rails. At one point, we had lights going off. So, it was just something to enjoy, but also something that when Jasmine and I talked, we're like, let's do that fresh and kind of get it in a different way. So if you did not come live and you're watching this for the first time, you can ask somebody about what that was and try to get the insider scoop. So for those of you I haven't met before who are seeing my face and hearing my voice for the first time, my name is Michaela O'Donnell, and I am the Executive Director of the Max to Pree Center for Leadership at Fuller Seminary. We are one of about 6 centers whose job it is at Fuller to be really external facing. Fuller is in the business of serving and educating graduate students. And as an expression of that, we are in the business of serving and educating learners, leaders across industry, specifically for the Dupree Center, who want to think about making a redemptive impact through their work, who see their calling as very significant, no matter what context they're in. And we have a lot of fun doing that. One of the things that we think is really critical for people being able to join God's mission of redemption, to be able to participate in all that is good and holy, is actually doing a lot of their own inner work. It's how we show up in the world, right? And how we show up in the world in hopefully a distinctively Christian way. Our model of how we get to all the different kinds of resources we do, including this conversation that we're going to have with Jasmine, as we go from research to resources for real life. So we've been doing a bunch of research on what healthy leadership looks like, and we're starting to kind of experiment with conversations and resources that are in that vein, and that's very much what we'll be doing today. Now, I just told you that we're mostly in the business of learners, but I do want to announce that Jasmine and I, and actually some other really cool people, are going to be part of a brand new flagship. I hope it becomes flagship for Fuller Seminary. I'm speaking that into existence, Jasmine. The Doctor of Global Leadership, Redemptive Imagination in the Marketplace. This is a degree for people who maybe already have a master's degree in something like law or business, or maybe even a theology degree, but find themselves in the context of the marketplace and want to think about how faith informs that. So if you find yourself compelled to this conversation today by Jasmine and are interested in what I just said, reach out and we can talk about that. Okay, so even I got to know you, Jasmine. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember this very clearly. I got an email. I'm not always the best emailer, so it's just I just be honest about my personal flaws. And I was getting an email on repeat from a beloved mentor of mine, Mark Lau Branson. And I think you had him in class. Is that right?
Yes, I had been stalking him before I actually got in his class because I knew that I was a practical theologian and I needed to learn from the master.
That's well said. He is the one who taught me PT, and it shapes the way I move through the world. So I'm very grateful for him. And he just was emailing me. It was all caps, Michaela, you need to meet Jasmine. And so eventually, when your mentor is all capsing you, you respond. And we had a first conversation, and I immediately was like, wow, okay, I have a lot to learn from Jasmine. Jasmine is right in the sweet spot of those that we're trying to serve at the Dupree Center. And we kind of, that was maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. We've just kind of become friends since. So I want to give you a chance just to kind of introduce yourself. Tell us what you do for work, kind of all your official stuff. Start out just by telling us more about yourself.
Sure. My name is Jasmine Bellamy. Professionally, I'm the Vice President of Merchandising, Planning, and Allocation at Reebok. I'm also their head of culture. And from a ministerial perspective, I'm the founder and spiritual director for Love 101 Ministries.
So a busy and full byline there. You almost said it in one mouthful. That was impressive. So Someone certainly who has position and influence and is inside of a big corporation, and then I think moves that pretty seamlessly into ministry world and probably sees I look forward to hearing you unpack the integration between the two. But I've also heard you describe like what you do for work, like regardless of if you're at Reebok or Love 101, like tell us more about the heart behind your work.
Yeah, I'm a love practitioner, a joyful disruptor with a redemptive imagination. And I also often add that I'm a business and cultural transformer. So all of those things definitely come to life, whether it's through Reebok or Reebok in the business sense or the culture sense, and definitely the forefront of Love 101.
I think that's the first tidbit and thing that I'll take away from our conversation today is, we get to know ourselves, and we learn to introduce ourselves. Somebody asks, what do you do? What are you up to? And we start with the byline stuff, but you got a very clear articulation of the deeper work that you're doing. Can I ask you, how did you come by that clear articulation?
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny as you asked that question, so many things came to mind. One, you said it from the beginning, to know yourself well. And so I have definitely been on a multi-year journey of knowing myself really well. But what I've also, some of those taglines came from other people telling me what they saw. And not that I asked them to, but as they would say things to me, I paid attention to what they were saying. And so a lot of that language, it was from what others saw, that I felt when they said it perfectly described who I knew I had become. And honestly, just to kind of pivot back to the DGL for a moment, and this is going back to our conversation, because it was even a long conversation about that program. But I remember the day you called me and you said, let me run this by you. Does this feel like what you're looking for? Does this cover it all? And I don't know if you remember this, but I wept. You had said everything that was in my heart of why I knew I was here and what I knew I was being called to. And so redemptive imagination came from that program because it was describing exactly who I am. I just didn't have I just felt your language was even more thoughtful and more succinct. And so I've added that to my description of who I am as well.
Oh, I love that. And that's pretty powerful, actually. Just this sense of openness to letting others speak into our lives, reflect who we are.
To be mirrors, to be mirrors.
To be mirrors. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And
Mm.
I'm glad it resonates. And that certainly we want to be building something that resonates too. So jumping off of that, these very clear descriptors of what you're up to as you're situated in a very, prominent leadership position. When I stop and think about the fact that someone that's in charge of culture at a major corporation is guided in the ways I've heard you talk about by love, by being a love practitioner, that's very striking to me. And so the first thing I want to ask you is, can you unpack what you mean by the fact that you're guided by love no matter where you show up, but especially in your work context?
Yeah. So I have Love 101 was built off of this idea of being dedicated to the theology and the practice of love. And even since its founding, I've added the spirituality of love, because it definitely, and I think you'll appreciate this as a practitioner, there is that. It is not just what I think, it's not just what I believe, but it is how I manifest, how I incarnate those beliefs. And so what ended up happening for me is when I was invited to lead what was originally called change management under United Against Racism for Reebok, that when I started to do that work, it was spiritual work. It was clear to me to change a culture to be anti-racist and to walk people through that journey. That was spiritual work. So it happened to happen at the right after the murder of George Floyd. I was already into, my first year of seminary. So I had no other way to process, to create a framework other than that was based from a spiritual perspective. And so as I started to do that work, it was really about finding the language, in a corporate space, but it was all very theologically based. So it was all rooted in love. And when I say rooted in love, it is, one, being focused on the fact that it is God's nature, and it is, as it's God's nature, it's our nature, and that we are looking at every human as the Imago Dei. And so what does that look like when I'm actually honoring people, the thou, as Martin Buber would say, as opposed to the it, the thingification of people, the dehumanization of people, which unfortunately the marketplace is actually known for. So just in that, I mean, that alone could change how you transform a culture. How do we actually humanize people versus thingify people? And how we practice becomes very different when we see them that way. And I would also say what the other piece of love is that redemptive part of love, that that idea that the flourishing of humans is at the core of what we are, of all humans, not just myself, but every single human. So if I could put those two major concepts kind of at the forefront of what I do, which I would argue is love, and also that when we do those things, it produces fruit. And so if I line all of those things up and those become the core of which I'm working from all the time, I am acting in love, and the fruit that comes from it is birthed out of love, and it's just done in the context of the workforce. But it's no different than how I lead my ministry and manage our beloved community there. It is literally looking at humans, growing from their stories, honoring who they are, seeing them as gifts, guiding, helping folks grow and transform, how we solve problems together in community. All of those things are things that are birthed when we're operating out of love. It is not a power over, which is what our marketplace is also driven by. It's power with. And so it is countercultural. And so it's turning the marketplace on its head a bit, and operating out of some very different assumptions. And if we are really going to unleash or unlock the potential in people, it can't be undergirded by fear. And if we're really going to drive to the, synergy is one of my favorite words, that idea of when we come together, that there is more than what we actually individually contributed. Those things don't happen in cultures that are formed in fear. So love, I see love as the opposition to fear. And so again, all of those things become the tenets, so to speak, in terms of how I've led this transformational journey. I would say that specifically what we did was use a platform called Courageous Conversations as a communal practice to start the behaviors, so that we can be in community together, that it becomes a space that is more an opportunity to learn and grow from each other by hearing people's stories. And when you hear people's stories, that's when you humanize them, right? Yeah. So there was a particular practice that we used, or a particular space that we created to be able to accelerate it. And so once we created that space and people started to use those muscles, then it just really, trickles right into the actual day-to-day business. And those meetings happen in the midst of a business day. So it becomes this seamless seeping into, almost, as people are being transformed in those conversations, it's changing their lives. So it's not just changing how they show up at work, it's also changing how they show up at home, in their communities, as well.
Wow, that's powerful. Just going back to one of the first things you said, just that this is inherently, the journey to anti-racism is inherently spiritual work. Yeah. And just the confidence and the capacities to do that in a marketplace that is prone to thingification, is prone to bottom line, is prone to, I think, increasingly react and want to, let me say this in the most positive way possible, want to be doing the right thing in the wake of all the very, very tough news and realities that come our way. But the thing that I'm drawn even most to in all that you said is this idea of synergy. When you start impacting one area of a person's life, of a company, of a relationship, it inevitably seeps over. Can you talk a little bit more about how you've actually seen that play out?
Yeah. So if I even use my own personal journey, and then I'll share also what people have said. So for me personally, I started practicing love in 2018. And I remember somewhere around 2019 having an interview for a chief diversity officer role that I was a finalist for. And in that or as I was prepping for that conversation, I realized that everything that I was using, everything I was pulling from, were the things that I had cultivated in my own love practice. And so as I had that interview with this panel of 10 people, everything I was talking about was rooted in love, every single thing to navigate that conversation. And so that gave me the awareness that, no, this is not about your personal journey, right? This is actually about transforming cultures. This is about changing systems. This is about changing communities. This is transforming context. It was not just about my life. So that, and because of that, I could, by the time this invitation of leading United Against Racism comes up, I remember saying audibly, why are you asking me to do this? And at that moment, I could hear, you know exactly why. And I was just like, got it, let's go. And so I had been doing all of that work so that I could then step into this moment to be able to lead this work. Like I had a deep well to draw from to be able to do it. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it, though, is, I think the beauty of love, or how I practice love, it is about not driving to your own conclusions. And so when I started this work with Reebok, it was really an invitation. It was not a mandatory anything. People could come and be a part of courageous conversations. And what would happen is it was like that old Willa Blossom commercial. They told two friends and so on and so on and so on. So all of a sudden you saw people forwarding the invitation to all their friends, like even live while it was happening, you could see people joining because people were being touched by it as they were going. And what the beauty is that what people then started to share in their stories, they would say things like, well, what I heard here made me think about this. I became aware of this. And then I knew I wanted to be a better parent. I knew I wanted to be a better friend. I wanted to figure out how to be a better ally. I wanted to, it all started, because it's changing the human. And so what I learned very clearly in this journey, and again, I didn't expect to, but what I learned listening to people is that DEI is not an intellectual, exercise. I have come to learn that this is all intercultural formation. And so that is, and actually my first language before saying intercultural formation is that it's spiritual formation. And so once you start changing the insides of people and they're doing that inner work, it starts coming out in every aspect of your life. So, and again, if I go back to myself as a personal example, the person that I am that you've come to know is the result of my own individual practice of love. I wasn't always this way. I put that on Instagram, LinkedIn the other day. I'm like, I wasn't always a love practitioner and a joyful disruptor. But it's a part of my own spiritual formation or transformation in that sense.
And one thing I find, I don't know you're part of the story, and there's no need to even go into this, but I'm drawing the lines of the, so we're in a company, an organization, a team, a house, a neighborhood, whatever it is. We're in a group of people, and we're talking about this ripple effect that love has. And you're saying that that kind of love, when people are doing their inner work, that starts, they can show up as more loving.
Yeah.
And the catalyst for doing that inner work, in my own observation, you just bat this down and tell me if it's not even true, are usually pain and an embrace of the fact that we are first loved. Right? I mean, it's something like that. Tell me, unpack it, bat it down, reframe it.
Yeah, no, so I would say that, one, I agree with everything you said. I would also just, the other word that I would use is that love is a sanctifying process.
Mm-hmm.
And it is transforming us to be more Christ-like. And why the mantra for Love 101 is that love is a practice. What we practice, we become. I mean, one, it's the practical theologian in me, but it is that fact that it is not a one-shot situation and everything changes. It's the praxis. And that is the beauty of this journey. And what I've often or invite people to is to begin again. Yeah. Because the more we do it, the more we practice it, the more we try again, the more we reflect and learn on what happened the last time, and we try something new, we experiment. Yeah. Right? It allows us to be transformed and to be changed. And we're literally changing, I would argue, like even at the soul level as we do that. So to your point, the things that might have, the traumas, the things that might have hurt us in the past, as we practice love, those things don't have the power over us that they used to. Mm-hmm. In my case, it was a both and. I was at a place of stuckness. I'm definitely someone who's a type A, controlling my life, doing all the things I was supposed to do. Like I was never going to be a statistic for anything, all the things. Like I was always going to keep progressing and had all the plans. And I got to a place where I wasn't in a fulfilled life. And it looked great, but at my soul level, I just knew something wasn't completely there. And in that journey, I understood that at the root was a love that I had yet to understand. And so while I would argue that we won't ever really fully understand the depth of this love, it goes exactly to what you're saying, when we just say things like God loves us, yeah, I know God loves me, yeah, it's not a quip, like it is an identity that is very deep. And often, to your point, there is some event that helps us wake up. Yeah. So I one of the things I've written about is that the study of love is an invitation to wake up. And when that invitation comes, it can come in many different ways, but it's a beautiful journey. It doesn't begin, and end. It is constantly ongoing, and it is sanctifying work.
It's really beautiful. Thank you for unpacking that. And the term waking up has been showing up in a lot of different places in just my own world and investigation. So that's just really powerful. I want to build on this a little bit, because if I'm a listener, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I just want to hang out with Jasmine and be like her. Like, she's got this awesome role and she shows up just full of love. And then I have this other part of me that's like, but what about my performance metrics and the things and the Q4 looks like it's going down, and very real stuff like layoffs and people's lives. And I'm going to tell a brief thing, and then I'm going to let you talk about how this works for you, or how you've seen this play out. We're doing a project right now. It's a research project, this whole research into resources for real life. And we're investigating, what does healthy leadership look like? And No, and we've been talking to some really interesting people, Jasmine, some pretty high level people actually. And so you might not be surprised to hear that these super high level people are very ambitious with their goals and very driven and want to like truly accomplish and do transforming things in cool ways. They're also very invested in people. That surprised me a little bit, but not when I really started thinking about it. Like really care for whether it's the client or their team or shareholder, I mean, just you name it. What surprised me a little bit, I expected those things to come into tension with each other more. But here's the thing, Jasmine. Here's what I'm observing. This is fresh. You might call me in a year. I might be like, well, I was wrong. It's fresh. What I'm observing is that people who are achieving things at the highest level actually see the pathway to achieve those achievements as the care for people, not in contradiction. Like, okay, we can care for the customer in this way, we can care for our teammates in this way, and that actually ends up delivering better for shareholders. So this idea of love that you're bringing is not a fluffy thing reserved for the like sidelines. It may be the game changer that we're looking for in our companies. So what do you think? Does that resonate? Like, how have you seen results in the traditional marketplace sense be impacted by this spreading of love?
Yeah, I mean, one, I'm betting my dissertation on it, so I surely believe it. I think the important thing is as much as I am a love practitioner, I am also a business transformer. For sure. So, when I think about my Clifton Strength Binders, I'm all about strategic and connectedness and ideation and relatedness and learner. All of those things are how I drive business for sure, and how I lead teams, how I love teams. And I think that for me, I know what it is that I need to get to from a P&L perspective, whatever result that I need to drive to, whatever comp growth over last year or improved margin. My brain knows how to do those things. I know how to do those things in terms of what does that mean for my promotional plan and my product investment? Like, I know those things. Those are the easy things, actually. It's the people piece, how to unleash that vision to people so they can see it as well, how they can be partners and inspired on the journey to be a part of that. So if I even use my journey at Reebok as an example, I was there first as a consultant. So I came as a consultant to analyze the business and give a path. I delivered like a 35-page deck. This is what you need to do. So the work part was done. But when I was hired to actually do the job, then it became, I had to set that vision for the people. And I had to understand the people, understand their strengths, understand their passions. What part of this that really resonated with them? What were they bringing to the table that was really interesting to them, so that I could figure out how to unlock something in them that would push them to get to the goal. So I laid the strategy. It was about how to really empower, inspire, develop the passion in people so that they could clearly see the vision and also they're part of it. And I gave them the freedom to do it, so it wasn't like I became a micromanager on those people. I trusted them that because I was clear, and I would also add, I was their coach. I walked alongside them every time. I'm like, listen, I know I just threw a lot of new ideas at you. Let's sit in a room together, or on a Teams call together, and let's wrestle it down so you can understand what am I thinking? Where am I coming from? We can exchange. So I was also their coach and their guide on the journey, but I also trusted them to bring their expertise to the table to unlock something really powerful in the business. So I will say that to say that approach transformed our business fast. We put real results on the table in terms of margin change, health and inventory, launched all kinds of new projects, I mean, there were so many different things. It was actually so clear that all of these things happened at the same time. So that's just purely my business side of it. But then there was also the culture beyond my team for the whole business that also transformed. But I will also say what has also resulted in my team, I've probably had the lowest turnover on my team. And what I would also argue that as we created these behaviors out of courageous conversations that were all built off of this principle of love, we've also navigated a corporate transition. So I learned that it was beyond a DEI conversation. It was a human conversation. It was about becoming more human. And that is really where this redemptive imagination for the marketplace came for me, is that I had all these little glimpses of that there's a way to literally joyfully disrupt the marketplace to operate on a completely different beliefs and values that can be results driven and will absolutely impact growth and impact profitability. So all of those things can happen together in the same space.
Immediately, people are writing down your name right now, and they're like, okay, but can you consult with us? Like, can you take what you just talked about and help us do that? So I'm just saying, just putting that out into the world, because that's really something. That's a lot of pieces. And I also, like, you're using love to unlock too, because the high trust, the seeing what people bring to the table, the getting in there with them and coaching them, giving them space, that's loving too, right? Like that is a loving way to do business. I'm curious. So what about when you've set this new tone, certainly on the team and the people that roll up to you, and you've cultivated a changing tone in a larger organization, you've glimpsed another way in the larger system. What do you do when people are kind of like, yeah, I'm all on board, and then their actions are not on board? Like, well, I feel like that would happen I wonder if that happens a lot.
Because I loved it what you said, right? Because you started to say a new way, and what I completed that sentence in my head is a new way of being.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a couple of things. One, we've gone through rocky times, through transitions, and there's a truth telling that because I am a love practitioner that I can bring to the table now. There's an ability to hold tension in difficult things with people, that we're not trying to sugarcoat things. We're not trying to throw a party line on it. We're not trying to PR spin it. We can sit in things that are not great. And we can mourn it. We can grieve it, lament it, all the things. And we can also move forward. But it's a way that honors their humanity when you approach it that way. I'm not here to spin something to tell you that's awful and showing you that it's great. I actually can sit and say this sucks. But what has also happened, to your question too, is I know when I get those phone calls about a problem, that all you hear is the undertone of fear underneath it. And I won't take the bait.
How do you do that, Jasmine?
Like, the way I'm sitting here looking at you, I'm sitting here like, and actually what I've learned to do is ask better questions. Or sometimes I've had to say things like, I remember having a conversation and I could feel somebody forcing me to believe something that just I wasn't believing. And I stopped them in the middle of their trying to brainwash me. And I said, can we just hold space for the fact that this sucks? Can we just name it? That there's nothing great about this. It is what it is. But can we let's just hold that. And now that we do that, can we talk about then what do we do next? Where do we go now? And so I think that has been, that's the kind of thing, but we talk about at Reebok in our behaviors, call in versus call out. So there's let me not lash back out. but let me use curiosity. Let me bring some questions to kind of see what's happening here. What's the undercurrent? The new thing that I've been coming up with lately is asking the question of what is the belief that is driving how we're responding right now?
Mm. Wow.
And literally saying those words.
Yeah.
You know, what presumption might be happening here right now, right? And so I think if we can name those things, but it does take a moment to discern and observe. So we have to listen. We did a whole courageous conversation on conscious listening. And really being able to hear, and how do you navigate your own unconscious bias to make sure that you're hearing clearly, and how do you use question to kind of engage and move into conversation as well?
You used a word earlier in the conversation. You used the word praxis, Praxis, which is different than the word practice. Practice is in the Christian tradition. I'm not explaining this to you, Jasmine, you know this, but I'm explaining it to those who are listening to our conversation. Practice is this idea that we do something with regularity. A spiritual practice is we do something with regularity. It's part of a tradition that's longer than just us, right? But praxis is something kind of different. Praxis is this idea that in every action that we have, there are beliefs that are driving. They're the motors. Our beliefs are the motors for those actions. So, we say, oh, we're generous people, but then like, does that action actually come out in praxis? Like, we'll see. So I'm very, very struck by your question of stopping moments that feel like they're not going well, confusing, not lining up with what we've said we value on paper, and saying, what's the belief that's motoring this? Like because what you're actually helping people do is uncover praxis, helping them find the gap between kind of their values, the values that we theorize about and the values that are really in use. And I think that's another powerful takeaway that somebody can say, you can do that. But I'm also aware that comes with a kind of risk. And a lot of what you're talking about comes with a kind of risk. Do you feel that risk? How do you counsel others when they feel that risk? Like, talk to me about the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is I'm also clear of my privilege, right? I know that I've been in this industry for 30 years. I know that I'm a vice president. I know that I'm also really good.
Yeah.
And so I know that gives me some freedom, not some freedom, a lot of freedom. I also know that I'm fearless, so I'm not afraid. And it's partly because I've been through all of the things that happen in industry before, and I'm still here. So those things don't have power over me anymore. But again, that's a part of the journey. So I'm clear that there's a place that I am right now because of my story, and that is what unlocks freedom, and gives me the courage to take risks.
Yeah.
But it's funny, I don't even see it as risk. I really do see it as truth telling.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, because I believe I have an audacious belief, right? That we can do all the things that we say we want to do. I believe they're possible. And so Bell Hooks has this language around a woman who practices love essentially is like the biggest threat to the status quo. And so when I read those words, I'm like, you are absolutely right, Belle, because that is what I am. I'm the biggest threat to the status quo because I have I am all about excellence. Mediocrity actually makes me ill. It is like kryptonite to me. And so the pushing of the edges is just what I naturally do. And so risk to me feels less scary. Yep. Because mediocrity is what is scary to me. And so I'm constantly looking to that audacious thing that my early purpose work, I knew that I create possibilities. So I'm all about the art of the possible. Where could we go? What's not there on paper? so I know that that is a point of view and how I see all the things. So it's kind of important to say it out loud because there are other ways to see things. But that's kind of my my point of view. But part of why I love praxis too is because it has an eye of transformation.
Hmm?
Operating in the system, in the context, in the narrative, in the beliefs, also linking itself or grounding itself in interrogation, in and in our beliefs in terms of scripture and what would scripture point us toward. And so therefore, then what do we stretch to transform to in that? So that's what I personally say love is a practice. What we practice would be become, but I also know that love is a praxis for sure, because it is all of that work in it. But like I said, so I don't see it as risky, but I do see it as courageous. I do know that I've had people say to me when I've said the things I've said, they're like, did you actually say that? I'm like, yeah, like I'm just not afraid. Because I think when we bring these things that are behind in the back of our mind that we're thinking, but we're not saying, and we say them, it also creates space. I don't hold things that I think are going to make me like if I'm sensing something, I'll just inquire and ask the question because I don't need it to be resonating with me in a negative way in that sense. You know, like we just ask and we get it out the way. So I don't necessarily. I definitely see it more courageous than risky, but I'm also clear it's because of the privilege that I bring to the table and the life that I've lived that allows me to move in that kind of energy. But I said something the other day on LinkedIn, right? These things will ruffle people's feathers. They do, but I do them in a way not to be provocative, right? I do them because at the end of the day, I'm love is accountable.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
is truthful.
Yeah.
And so if I am really operating in it, I can speak the truth in love, even if that truth is challenging or makes me uncomfortable. But my goal is actually to be loving. I'm not doing it to be difficult. I'm really doing it to unleash our potential to grow, to flourish. And I want to get all of the opposition out of the way, the fear. I want to name it and speak straight to it so that we can get it out of the way so that there is space for the transforming work.
Yeah, that's really, really inspiring, actually. And I mean, I'm just struck by this sense of you talked about excellence ends up coming with a kind of privilege that you are stewarding toward what's possible, rooted in love. So these call in moments are moments that are synergistic with what's on paper, either from you or in a company that you work for. And so that's very powerful. That's very, very powerful. I am inclined to end our conversation with a couple of very real, like, these are people that actually I've talked to in the last couple of weeks. This is, we're recording this in February 2023. So, whenever you listen to it, these things may or may not feel as ripe, but my guess is they will in different ways. And I just want to set up a couple of these people, and then I want to ask you, Jasmine, how love might shape their response. And I know I'm giving you limited information. So take what you got, okay? So the first person is a tech manager. And tons and tons of layoffs happening in tech right now. And I talked to this person in the liminal space of when they learned they were going to have to lay off a lot of people. How might love shape that tech manager's response?
I think love shapes how that tech manager I will say one either advocates for people before the layoff actually happens. That might look like making sure that whatever they're getting on the other side of this severance is right and just, that we are calling out individual circumstances because we know their stories to make sure that we're navigating around. And I've absolutely been in exactly that seat where I know the people expense I've got to get to, so I know that requires cuts. But as we're cutting and I'm building a new organization that will allow the team that is remaining to flourish, I'm also advocating to make sure that the people who we let go, which is a beautiful thought about letting go, when we see it that way, when we get to a place of unhealth and we have to take hard, accountable decisions so that we could continue to flourish as an organism. If we see it that way, there's something that, again, is more humanizing than just trying to hit a people expense number. And so it's the, what do we do leading up to that? And then also, how do we hold them in that space, acknowledging as I'm sharing this horrible news that I know this is difficult to hear, but I also believe in your talent. And I know that that you will be a gift to a team as you've been to us. And I am so grateful for having gotten to walk alongside you and knowing you and how you've transformed us. That we can honor humans, even in difficult circumstances.
And center their stories.
Center them in their stories. You're absolutely right.
That's what I hear you saying is, it's not about your discomfort. It's about them and stewarding that responsibility. Thank you. Okay, one other one. So this person says, I am overwhelmed by the pace of bad news in the world. I have heard this, Jasmine, from a lot of people, especially 2023, then go to 2022. I mean, you could just kind of plop us down at any time. And from every layer of politics to, white Christian nationalism to organizations not, taking seriously their own commitments. People are like, I feel overwhelmed and I don't really even know how to show up to work, much less bring my whole loving self to work. How might love shape that response?
Yeah. One, I believe love is about presence, being here now. And usually my call to action anytime I speak somewhere is about being love in your context. So there are things that are swirling around us. I always go back to the words of Jesus, right? There will be trial and tribulation, but you connected to Christ. Christ is the overcomer of the world, but we do have to sit in it. But how can we change the context that's right in front of us? And so staying centered, drawing from a well that is not your own. I think for me, the biggest part of what allows me to move through life the way I do is that I am not pulling from me.
Right.
I am grounded in my faith. I am propelled forward because I am operating as God has designed me, and I am moving in obedience to the Holy Spirit, being who I was called to be. It is not my own doing. And so because I operate from that kind of place, from that kind of deep well, there is a transformative power for me to move in spaces and be present in anguish that doesn't come from me. And that, if I learned anything through Courageous Conversations, that's what I learned. It's not about me, but it's about the fact that I've been a vessel for the Holy Spirit to come and operate and work in a space and in a context to transform in a way that I never could. So staying present, staying grounded, being rooted in love, allowing love to do its transforming work, even in the deepest anguish and lament and grief. There is mercy. So that's how I kind of move through all of the horrible news that we just get slammed with on a day-to-day basis.
That's very compelling and centering. I felt myself taking deep breaths and sort of going all the way into just my own
Mhm.
sense of what can I do, which
Mhm.
is, what is mine to do? That's an important question that
Mhm.
shaped by love, as an orienter in terms of where we put our energy for each
Mhm.
day.
Yeah.
Jasmine, I am so grateful to the way that you've let us into your world. You're a remarkable person, and I think I'll say this: I think you're an exemplar in how to lead and work and live in a distinctively Christian way, one rooted in love, that I know is really going to probably both challenge and inspire people as they listen to this. Jasmine, as we wrap, I'm just interested, where can people find you if they want like
Yeah.
more?
Yeah, I think definitely LinkedIn is an easy place for sure. Um, I'm Jasmine Bellamy on LinkedIn, as well as Love 101 Ministries is on LinkedIn. There's also the website love101ministries.com, Instagram Love 101 Ministries, or Facebook Love 101 Ministries. All of those are definitely the easiest places to find me for sure.
Okay, and we'll include all those links in and when we distribute this video. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.